Well, it really is a problem sometimes because we've all been in meetings where they don't go well. They're maybe too long, or, we get somebody who dominates the conversation, or people are, not listening, or they're not participating, or don't know why the meeting's held. So it really is important to have good, effective meetings so you can keep people engaged. And really, it's not as difficult as you might think. There's a few things I think that if people keep in mind in running the meetings, school council meetings, they can be really effective. It's kind of, if you take the things that are ineffective, it's kind of like turning them on their head and saying, well, turn them upside down and say, here's not an effective thing. So things like a clear purpose, things like roles for everyone, clear roles, because everybody has a role to play in the meeting. Opportunity to prepare. So you come to the meeting prepared. Also, we need to have a clear timelines and make sure that the meeting stays on schedule, things like that. And of course, things like clear decisions, actions, so that people know what the result of the meeting is. Those are some characteristics of an effective meeting. And of course, then as well, there's things like, that there's going to be conflict. There always is in any kind of meeting, and you want to deal with that constructively so that it doesn't derail the meeting and get off track. So those are just a few things that I think will make an effective meeting. Well, as I said, you start with the purpose, and you start there, but also you have to work with, I think the school council chair has to work with the principal and identify the key items for the agenda. Obviously, there will be some things that will be ongoing, things like maybe a principal's report, or if there's fundraising, there might be a fundraising report, or if there are other subcommittees, there would be reports from those, and then things like finance, obviously. But then you start to look a little bit beyond that, and you say, well, there might be some issues that we should be dealing with. You look at our goals for the year as a school council, and then the meeting agenda really falls in place around those. But I think one thing that can help is to make sure that maybe the most important things are dealt with first. And then if there is an issue with time going over, that you maybe cut some things out that can be left to the next meeting. So that's a few things I think that can help. I think one of the first things is that you have to focus on why everyone's there. And I think that's to know that there's a clear purpose to both the school council and then to the meeting that we have. So we start with that clear purpose, which really is to improve student achievement in the school and to have everyone involved in the local school so that we can improve education for our kids. I think if we start there, then the rest kind of falls in place because everybody agrees that's why we're here and that's the purpose of the school council. And once you've done that, I think you've gone a long way to having a successful meeting. Well, certainly from a chair, it does take some experience, but there are a few things that a chair can do to help in those situations. One is certainly overall to maybe have each of the items in an agenda timed, and that way if someone does start to wander, that maybe there is you can say, look, we've only got 15 minutes or 10 minutes for this particular topic, and while what you've got to say is interesting, maybe it's not pertinent to the discussion. Let's move on. Another thing you can do, if it's of something that could be of interest to the whole group, you can have a parking lot where you take ideas that are brought up that maybe aren't directly related to the subject being discussed and put them in the parking lot and say we'll revisit those at the end of the meeting or maybe at another meeting. But certainly there are times when the chair has to sometimes say, I don't think that's quite relevant to the discussion. Why don't you keep that thought and we'll pursue that later. But it clearly is one that needs some experience, but I think it can be managed by a chair with just a few of those simple tips. I think the key there is for them to focus on what the overall purpose of school councils is and what the purpose of the particular item is that you're discussing right now, and then focus on those things as opposed to maybe the one item that this person wants to bring up all the time. I think that they obviously have a need they want to be involved in the school, and so you want to use that energy, towards the best that you can. Sometimes it might mean taking the person aside outside the meeting and talking to them about, what is the issue that they really want to bring up, and maybe find a creative way of bringing that into an agenda, maybe not making it the largest issue, but at least recognizing they have a concern, bringing it forward. And often once people have some of those issues dealt with, they become more active participants in the overall work of the school council, and some of those issues kind of fall off the side. you bring these people together. They're from all these different backgrounds, whether it's, parents and you've got educators, and all of them have a slightly different viewpoint, but hopefully in the end, they can all agree on the common purpose to improve student achievement and to become engaged with the school in making education better for the students. And if you can focus on that, I think that can often then remove the issues around, a single issue or someone who's got an axe to grind, that kind of thing. Well, an effective meeting toolbox, there's a number of things, tips really is what it is, around keeping a meeting productive, so that everyone agrees on, can say that it was an effective meeting. For example, one thing is, I talked about when you're looking at an agenda, think about I use the acronym PAL, P-A-L, so purpose, agenda, and limits. And so we talked about purpose in terms of those agenda items. Does each agenda item, do you know what the outcome is from that agenda item? And if something on an agenda item isn't serving the needs of the group, then maybe you shouldn't have it on as an agenda item. Or as I said before, you might choose to put the most important things first, and then the ones that aren't as important or aren't maybe as time specific, you can put on the agenda later. Second thing, of course, agenda. I've talked about an agenda, and that's, of course, an agenda is important, and I think it's important that with that, then finally the L stands for the limits, and consider for each of those agenda items putting on a time limit or a suggested time. And you might have somebody keeping time to remind you when that time is up. But at least that way, you can maybe put some offense around kind of the meeting in terms of not going over and saying, here's a suggested timeline. And if when you're preparing the agenda, the time looks too long, either you adjust the times or you drop some items and put them on to the next meeting. That's one example of an effective meeting toolbox. Another thing, as I mentioned before, is a parking lot. So this is the idea that, look, a meeting goes on, maybe you're discussing things, and people bring out ideas. It's important for the chair to maybe say, oh, that's a good idea, but it's not really pertinent to our discussion now. Let's put it in the parking lot because it's a great idea, and then let's come back to it later. And then finally, another tip for in the toolbox, if you will, is look at evaluating your meetings periodically. I don't think it has to happen at every meeting, but maybe every 2 or 3 meetings, maybe just have a quick evaluation where you look at the pluses and the minuses and the deltas. In other words, things that went well, things that maybe didn't go as well, and maybe some changes we should make. I think that if you do that, then you'll keep making sure that your meetings are as effective as they can be, and people will want to come and say, hey, I came out of that meeting, it was worthwhile for me to spend my time there, and we accomplished something. Well, certainly, you need to have someone who models good behavior, and it's probably someone who is really putting a tight rein on everything is not going to be conducive to good decision-making or good quality discussion that you want to have at a school council. But having said that, I think still it needs a firm hand from a chair so that it doesn't get out of control. And especially when we think about decision-making and things like consensus decision-making, which is something that I think most school councils probably strive toward is reaching consensus. And of course, when you reach consensus, it's not like a vote, because you're not saying, okay, there's winners and losers, but you're trying to say, can we support this decision? Can we buy into this decision? And maybe we don't agree with everything, but can we support this decision? And that takes some effort on the part of the chair to, make sure everybody's opinion is heard, but at the same time, making sure that we get to the end, which is a decision on a particular item, and getting a decision that everyone can buy into and can at least support. There's nothing worse than coming to a meeting and feeling like you were shut out, you weren't listened to, you weren't given the opportunity to be heard. And it's key then for a chair to listen to. There's always going to be the people who want to speak. Who want to be the first ones to speak, and it's easy to listen to those. And that's important to give them time. But it's also important for the chair to give opportunity for everyone to speak. And sometimes it may be asking that person who tends to be a bit more quiet, and you get to know that as a chair, asking them, so, Joe, what do you think about that? Or Karen, what do you think about that particular item? You haven't said much about it. What do you think? And that's especially important as we look to reaching consensus on a particular issue. So listening is a key skill, and it also goes along with understanding, what mood of the group is in terms of a decision and the thinking. So listening is absolutely a key skill for a chair. It's tough. There are time constraints on everybody, but ideally, especially for important matters that might have the school council reviewing some information, maybe it's information from a principal, maybe it's a proposal for some new, or maybe it's input that the board is requesting that needs some feedback. It's always good, if possible, to hand out material that's going to be discussed beforehand. That would give enough time to send out some material. It doesn't have to be a lot. Maybe it's about some key decisions out to the school council members, so that when they come, they've already had some background, have been able to look at some of the information. I think that's important. And of course, that's where the chair's role comes in as well, in terms of making sure that they are informed and making sure as well that the chair is informed about those decisions. Because as a chair, you need to come prepared as well, knowing what it is you want to accomplish through the agendas, like we've talked about, but also in getting that material ready and lined up for those participants in the meeting. Good meetings require planning, first of all, and that we talk about the agenda. We talk about sitting down with between the school council chair and the principal, and then getting that material out so that the participants can be prepared as well. So planning is important. And secondly, I think, as I said, everyone is responsible for making sure that the meeting is successful. So whether you have a role like a chair or a minute taker or someone who might do some timing, every participant is responsible for making sure that it's successful, giving their opinions, being respectful, listening well also, and making sure that that meeting is successful. It's everyone's responsibility. And really, I think, in the end, you want that meeting to be effective, so that everybody can say, hey, we accomplished something, we know what we accomplished, and being part of a school council is something worthwhile and something that I want to continue on because I know we get things done.